Welcome to a live chat tonight with Elna Holst. Welcome, Elna. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Hey, thank you for having me. Thank you for dragging me onto this.
Oh, I'm so glad that you could come. Now, everyone, if you guys are watching, make sure you pop in and say hi. If you have any questions, throw them up and I'll do my best to answer them as we go. We've got some questions for Elna first, so we will be discussing her amazing book, Gretel on Her Own. So we will get on into it. All right. Now, the first question, which I actually took from another a YouTuber that I love watching. And I just love this question. I thought this is so brilliant. So can you sum up Gretel on Her Own in 3 words?
Yeah. I'm glad you love that question because I kind of hate it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It is really mean, isn't it?
It's a great question to put, not such a great question to answer, but you did let me know about it beforehand, so I've had time to think about it because I'm usually not a summer upper kind of thing. It's not my game, but I try. So I went with the alliteration because that always helps me in times of need. So the first word is temptation, which I think is a pretty good theme running through it all. And then there's trauma, which is also underpins the whole fairy tale aspect of it. And then there's treats, of course, because
of course,
yeah,
I love that throughout the whole book. It's so fabulous. So for anyone who hasn't read this is a fairy tale retelling. Well, sort of a twisted fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel. But it's set 20 years after the original fairy tale. And it is just absolutely beautiful. Those are fantastic words to sum it all up. I really like that.
Oh, good.
They're really good. I really adore that.
One of my favorite reviews actually said freaky, creepy, and amazing. And I thought that those were pretty good words too.
That works as well. That's fantastic. Oh, I love that. That is fantastic. Sorry, I'm just looking into this. We're just having a little bit of trouble with the comments at the moment. There we go. Okay, cool. Now, just a question for you as an author. What books did you read as a child that actually inspired you to write?
Yeah. Okay, long story.
Not a problem.
We have to fill up the time somehow, right?
That's right. I'll relax. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that becoming an author, I feel like it's what I've wanted to do since I kind of became aware of myself as a person in the world. Because I've always been fascinated with stories, and I think it's to do with my aunt being a librarian. I mean, I tend to blame her for this because she always turned up and she was and I was always fascinated by books on the shelves. I loved the physical objects that were books. So I was really, I didn't draw so much as other kids did. I was always copying letters, trying to get them. And I mean, even when I was 2-3 years old, really, really early, I made whatever grown up was about me actually just into my personal secretary, and they would write down these things that I said. And then I saved them, and I have no idea if it actually said what I said, but yeah. But off topic, that was not what you were asking me about.
No, so, that's more than okay. I'm happy with this.
Yeah. So then, and I love being at my grandfather's house because it was kind of old-timey feel and kind of almost gothic. So
That's awesome.
and he had these bookshelves, dark bookshelves filled with all these kind of books, and he had these fairy tales by like H.C. Andersen and the Grimms and like everything, and they were not like the kids' versions. So these were
no.
like the original stories, and they were like, and that's the thing about the original fairy tales. I mean, they're kind of freaky, like freaky and creepy. It's pretty good description of how fairy tales work. So like that was really inspiring to me. But I do have one book to mention, and that's The Wolves of Willoughby Chase by Joan Itkin. Yeah, because when I first got a library card, which I was very happy about, as you can imagine, I was like 7 years old and I got my library card, and like it was a much bigger event than getting my driver's license and things like that. So having this card, and like I could go in there and like get books, because I mean my parents were pretty young when they had me, so they couldn't afford like my addiction.
It is. It's absolutely an addiction.
Yeah. So being able to take books home from the library was a big thing. And I got The Wolves of Willoughby Chase, and it was so fun. I absolutely adored the book right up until the ending. And I hated the ending. And no spoiler here, because I don't actually remember the ending now. I mean, it's a long time ago. I haven't reread it, and I should someday, maybe before I had mentioned it here, actually. But yeah, I hated the ending. And so I did like story of my life. I got out my paper and pen, and I wrote an alternative ending. And
I love that.
And I like tore it out and I put it in the library book at the end. And then I returned the library book just like nothing. That's like 7 years old. I did that.
You were 7.
Yeah.
That's so adorable.
And the thing was, like, I went home, I didn't think any more about it. And then the next time I came into the library, and of course, all the librarians knew me. I didn't know that they knew me, but I was a shy kid. So like, I didn't used to talk to them, but of course they'd noticed. And then one of them came over to me, and she started talking to me. She said like, come here, I want you to look at the book that you returned last. And I was like completely freaked out. Like, what did I do wrong? Like,
oh no.
And she had found like the paper with my alternative ending, and she'd like taped it into the book, like in the library book. So that's now part of that book at that particular library. So everyone could read it from there on. Yeah, exactly. And that was like my big author moment. That was when I really realized like, I'm gonna get on these shelves. Like, this is the start.
Oh my gosh, this is fascinating.
That's what I want to do. So yeah.
Oh, that is the coolest story.
Yeah. I mean, it was important to me.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. Like, that's absolutely like affirming more than anything else could be.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing about librarians, isn't it? I mean, they're the best people.
Yes, they are, absolutely. So what actually inspired you to write Fractured Fairy Tales? Was it that whole idea of just changing elements of fairy tales that you didn't like, or?
Yeah, exactly. Because the whole thing was that I think I mentioned it at the end, like I was commissioned by my publisher to like write a fairy tale retelling for like an anthology. So I first wrote it as a short story, and then when I wanted to turn it into a novella and like make it more like I really wanted to like put emphasis on that aspect of it, like this is actually like all the text seeping in, because that's the whole thing with a retelling, isn't it? That like that the other text is kind of always present. It's always like kind of haunting the new version, so to speak. So there's that. And also there was in my mind, like in my head, where all the things happen, this story always had like a really strong narratorial voice, like the narrator's voice was really strong to me. Usually I see my stories, but with this one I really heard it as well. So I wanted to like develop that, and how much I wanted to have a pretty knowing narrator. So I wanted to break off like the story with these kind of ruminations on what could have happened, and like, because there's always this feeling that you don't really know what happened to Hansel and Gretel when they were younger. You're always like, what actually happened to them, because they were kids, like they were really young, and they don't remember it, also because it was traumatic.
Absolutely. And trauma and age and memory are all faulty. Like,
exactly.
Never know how they interpret it after the fact.
Yeah, and that's constantly fascinating to me, like these kind of things that we think we know, but we don't really know. And like, the
whole idea that everyone has their own truth and it will never line up with anyone else's, because
exactly
we bring all of our
and like when we tell each other about it, that also creates a kind of tension, like between the different, that can also like change the story.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I love that. So when you write, are you someone who sits down and has to plot it all out, or are you more of a discovery writer?
I know you like this question. It comes up. The thing is that I'm kind of a mix. I used to be like, from the beginning I was totally a discovery writer, because that's the whole like joy of writing, somehow, that you actually tell yourself the story. I mean, that's like what really gets you going and what gets those words flowing and everything. But to me, when I was trying, because I mean, I started out as a short story writer. I mean, that was kind of my genre, so to speak. But I wanted to develop. I wanted to write bigger things. Like I wanted to write more complex stories and things like that. And for that, I just couldn't do it because I was used to writing like 6,000 words and I was done. Like, and if you want to write a novel, you can't have that kind of intensity in every chapter. I mean, it's good if you can, but so I had to have some kind of plan, or it like kind of, it's like a souffle, like it just pulls together. So I have to have some kind of outline, but it's completely messy, and it's not always the way the book ends up. so it's like, I've got notes everywhere, like literally everywhere. I have like my big book of ideas, but then I also have notes on my phone, of course, because we all have our phones with us everywhere. So and sometimes it's just words and I can't remember why, but they are important somehow. So I had to like put them up on the wall and see what happens.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that, you know, you've kind of developed as a writer for that, because I'm always curious about discovery writers, because I'm a discovery writer, but I've only ever really written fairly short things. So I'm always curious about the longer form writers.
Exactly. And
how
I think
they do that.
Exactly. Because it is hard. It is really hard to write longer things, even as a discovery writer, without some kind of idea where you're going. Like some kind of even if it's just also a skeleton. Also because it does require more editing. I mean, if you've written a really long discovery text, like it usually requires more editing.
Very true. Now Clancy, hi Clancy, she's come in to say hi. Thanks for joining us. Anyone else? I know we've got a few people watching. Feel free to say hi, let us know where you're watching from, and if you do have any questions, put them up and we'll try to get to them by the end.
Absolutely.
All right, now because Gretel on her own is, oh my god, I love the whole thread of the treats and the sweetness, and that it's not just in the food, it's in the characters, and it just flows through so beautifully. But are you yourself a sweet tooth?
good question. I'm definitely a sweet tooth at heart. I mean, I don't think I would have written this story quite this way if I hadn't been. But yeah, but I don't eat a lot of sweets because I get brain fog from like too much sugar. So it's not great for writing. Like I can't focus.
Oh, right. So do
It's
you
kind of like
actually eat?
alcohol to me. Like I just end up woozy. Yeah. So
Going off in all tangents.
yeah,
So
yeah.
do you snack at all while you write? Like, or it's
Yeah, no,
completely off the
I
cards?
actually don't, because I'm usually it's like this sounds so pretentious, but it's like it's quite an intense physical thing for me to be writing. Like, I mean, I'm not saying I'm hallucinating, but maybe just a little bit like so I'm usually completely in there, and I'm like with Gretel or Dorchen or whatever, like, so I can't like break off and like feed my body because it doesn't exist to me like in the moment.
You're just completely focused.
Yeah. So I
That's
might
impressive.
maybe drink, but I would definitely not eat. I mean, I don't feel those kind of things. Even when I'm writing about food, actually, that's weird. But
No, that's interesting because I
yeah.
like that. Katie Rye is here as well. Hey, from New York.
Oh,
Thanks
hello.
for joining us. Wow.
Great.
It must be quite early there. Thank you so much for joining us. Alrighty. Now, I found this really fascinating because so many books you have, at least one of the main characters is this really, outstanding, up there sort of profession. And I loved that Gretel just has an everyday job. Just an everyday job. She's just a normal person. How did you actually choose her job? And was that conscious, or was it just she needs to have some kind of job?
Yeah. No, I'm glad you asked that question because her job was actually very important to me, and I did spend a lot of time because it's interesting that you say normal person, because that's kind of what I wanted this to be, because those are the best fairy tale retellings to me, where you get this juxtaposition between like a fairy story and like magic and things like that, and then you have these really ordinary gritty situations, which is like everyday life, and I just love the meeting of those. So that was important to me, and also because in Hansel and Gretel, of course, the father is always a woodcutter. And I figured, like, if you're a woodcutter in a tiny little village at the lip of the forest, I figured that maybe your daughter wouldn't have like a white collar job, and like, because if she had, she would have moved. That was my thinking. Maybe she wouldn't have stayed in the village. And also, that's one reason. So I had to keep her in the village. And and I also thought that with her situation, like with the trauma that happened, and with her mother's ongoing problems, like her mother is a whole thing in itself, and and with trancelike problems and everything, I figured that she's got so much going on that she's not, I mean, she doesn't have the headspace for like a vocation. Like, I mean, I think to her, a job is just a way to get money. I mean, it's just something she has to do. And like, but also I tend to want to write about jobs that I actually know anything about, because I think it gets better that way. Unless it's like pure fantasy, because then I can do whatever I want. Like, no one can tell me, no, that's not how you do it. But and cleaning, I know. I have worked as a cleaner. I worked at all kinds of things, but and I find it quite an interesting job. I mean, much more interesting than people give it credit for, because if you think about it, cleaners are almost invisible people. and like they're just there in the background, like, and that's literally the case for Gretel, because she cleans after hours at like the local school, so she has access to this like public space when there's no one around, and that's just I don't know, that just tickles me. I love
No,
the idea of that. Yeah,
it's beautifully done. Like it kind of ties in really well with everything else that's going on. It's not this issue that comes up sort of thing.
yeah.
Alrighty. So just a question, because I always love recommendations. What's the best book you have read recently?
Yeah, I'm really terrible at giving recommendations, actually, because the thing is that I'm still, I mean, I read a lot. I never got out of the habit, so to speak. So I read a lot, and I'm a weird reader. I mean, I'm like, I read almost everything. Like if someone has dropped their shopping list or something, I'm there. I want to read it. Anything that has text, basically, I want to read. So I read
awesome.
I read all kinds of stuff, and I mean, some of it's bad and some of it's great, and like everything in between. And I never DNF. Almost never. It does happen more regularly because life's short, but I've told myself that once or twice, that you have to give up.
Yes.
But I try to remember what the last book was that I got excited about and that I actually wanted to share with people, and I think it was Silver Beasts by Emma Sterner Radley. Which I listened to as an audiobook with PJ Morgan, and it was excellent. It was really great.
Oh.
And it's like this fantasy YA queer story, and like a series. So yeah, I totally recommend that. And I really loved it. I don't read a lot of YA stories because sometimes they just rehash things, like which all books can do, but sometimes I find it more prevalent in YA. But when it's good, it's like it just warms your heart, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So that was
it's so great, and you feel like, oh, if I had this like as a teenager, it would have meant so much to me, and like so yeah. So yeah, I'm excited to recommend that book to everyone.
Cool. So that was called Silver Beasts, was it?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and who was the author? Sorry,
Emma Sterner Radley. Yeah,
that's awesome. I am absolutely writing that one down because that sounds fabulous. All right, so I know you go in sort of like a trance when you write, which I think is fabulous. But do you need a certain environment? Like, do you need it to be quiet? Do you need there to be some kind of noise, or is that completely irrelevant?
Yeah. I usually keep like a strict silence thing, but I mean that's not always doable, and I want to like keep up my daily word count or whatever. Like I mean some kind of things, like because I get out of it way too easily. So I want to write every day, preferably just something. But yeah, silence is the best. But that's not always available to you. But on public transport, I mean, we do have like this, because this is Sweden. So we do have like these quiet zones on like the trains where you can go and no one's allowed to talk. So it's brilliant. I get a lot of writing done on those because I ride trains a lot. I mean, not during the pandemic, but usually I like trains. But I also I do listen to like rain sounds, like put on headphones and like listen to like rain or like white noise or anything, just to shut out when I have to, like when there are other people in the room, so if I'm
so you don't have that kind up and down of sound. It's consistent sort of
Yeah,
background.
no.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to write to music. I think it sounds so cool. I mean, I love that people have, like these playlists and things. And I actually did have a playlist for Gretel. I did. But I never listened to it while I was actually writing. So it was more like
Right.
preparatory or like afterwards. And like it
Oh,
it
cool.
informed the writing, but I couldn't do the actual writing while listening to the
Oh,
music.
wow. That's really interesting. That's cool. Wow. I always find it interesting the different noises that writers prefer when they
Yeah,
write. And I
absolutely. Yeah.
find it fascinating. Now I'm just really curious because I've been thinking about it a lot. But what encouraged you to set this 20 years on from the original trauma that happened with Hansel and Gretel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. Well, the thing is that my original idea was simply Gretel falls in love with a witch. I mean, I should have said spoiler here, but I'm assuming everyone's actually read the book. So that was my original idea. And I guess I could have done that with Gretel as a child, but it would have been a bit harder, and I'm not sure I would have been comfortable with it. So yeah, long story short, that was it. And also, I quite like spin-offs. Like I like to know things about characters, not during the actual story, because we already have that story somehow.
Yeah.
So I like to see what happens.
To know
and
what happens. Yeah.
Especially when it's been about like children, because I mean it's it's interesting to me to see what happened to them later on, so to speak. So yeah.
I was so blown away by what you had happen with them, because I'm like, oh wow, it's almost like they got taken out of the fairy tale and they became real. Like this was traumatic. Like how else would people handle this if they grew up after something like this happened? Like
exactly, because I mean it's such a weird story. I mean the actual Hansel and Gretel, it's really crazy. I mean, if you actually sit down and read it, it's like first it's this mother who like puts her own kids, or she's sometimes a stepmother, but whichever way, like she puts her kids out into the forest because she thinks they're starving and like it's better if they die so they don't have that many mouths to feed. And like and like that in itself is kind of horrific. But also there's this father who's like, he doesn't want to go along with it, so that kind of makes him a good guy sort of in the story. And I'm like, no, that's not actually my definition of a good guy. I think my definition of a good guy would be someone who actually
stop it.
Stop his wife from putting his kids out in the woods. I mean, I don't know. What do I know? I'm a lesbian, but I think I think that So I've always had kind of issues with this story, and also the burning of the witch is like quite, because they're almost gleeful, like in the story. It's like this party of burning the witch, like, and you're like little kids killing a grown-up figure. I mean, I know she was supposed to eat you and all that stuff, but still, like, I think they're a bit too upbeat about it for my comfort level. But yeah, what do I know?
Oh no, I actually found that really fascinating, because that they're slowly becoming more and more sapphic, twisted tales of fairy tales, and so many of the authors, and even me, when I've thought about rewriting a fairy tale, it's the ones I've liked that I've wanted to rewrite. And I love that you've kind of gone, no, this is creepy, man. No, we've got to fix this. We've got to deal with the aftermath. I love that. I think that is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, but I'm usually like that. That's what I say. I'm a weird reader. I like to play with text, even that I don't necessarily love everything about, because usually if I love everything about it, I don't need my own version of it. Like, I'm happy with the version that that's already there. But I mean, same
Absolutely.
time, I mean, most of my books are some kind of retellings, like, and I mean, I do love Pride and Prejudice, which I rewrote in Lucas, for example. I mean, I do love it, but there are also, like, there was this one character which I felt like this is not a true story. This is not. I'll tell you what happened. Let me tell you. So
yeah,
yeah,
no,
like
that absolutely makes sense.
Mm.
Yeah, that's so brilliant. Now for your lovely readers and those who want to know more about you and follow your readings and get this amazing book, which I realized earlier I forgot to put up the cover of.
All right, yeah.
It's such an amazing cover. I love it.
I do love the cover. I do love the cover. Yeah, yeah.
Did you have a lot of say on the cover?
I usually get to fill out a form of like my own ideas and things about it, and then like Natasha Snow, who does most of the covers for 9 Star Press, she usually just works her magic with that, and I mean, it usually turns out great. So
yeah,
so
I think it's just it's so beautiful. It really captured me when I was first looking at it. I was like, oh, I've got to know what's behind this. I need to know what's in this book.
And I think
it is.
and I wanted it to be kind of dark because I wanted like to warn readers that this is not going to be too upbeat, so to speak. There's gonna be dark stuff in here too.
But it's so beautifully balanced with the lightness of with the treats and the candy and that sort of, I don't know, I felt like those two really balanced each other really well, like these dark themes that went through it, and then this kind of floaty candy floss that
I'm glad you felt that.
I loved that about it. Sorry, so totally off track there, but for anyone who is wanting to find some of Elna's writings and keep up with what she's up to, elnaholst.com, and I'll chuck that down in the comments when I can. It's not letting me put comments in at the moment, so but I will put that down with there so that anyone who is wanting, they can just click on it. And I didn't actually send you this question, so I'm really sorry. I'm going to throw this to you.
That's fine.
But what are you actually working on at the moment?
Oh, great! Yeah, I've actually yesterday just finished the manuscript for my latest project. So I'm like, and it's my longest novel yet, so it was quite an effort, and I've had stumble blocks like along the way. So, because I mean, it's intense, and it's always like that with the writing project, isn't it? Like you have certain points where you're like, I hate this, I don't want this anymore. Like I want to do something else. Like this is the worst crap ever. And then you get into like these delusions of grandeur, like, oh, this is the next big thing. So it's like total roller coaster ride all the way along. But right now, I'm pretty happy with where it is, and there's probably going to go more editing into it as I discuss it with like my editor and things like that. But
absolutely.
I'm just happy. And I've got, like I said, I have my big book of ideas, so there will be other things to work on.
That's brilliant. And do you have a break between? Like, do you have a break, or will you go on to a new project now while you're waiting for edits, or do you give yourself a break?
Yeah, it kind of depends, but usually I try not to take breaks because then I fall into this pit of gloom where I'm like, no, maybe that was horrible, and like I don't want to think about it, and the best way to not think about it is to go on to the next thing, and like gain some perspective. And it's also a good way to like come back to it later because you have a fresh pair of eyes if you've been into something else in between. So yeah.
Now you said this was your longest manuscript. Can I be cheeky and ask how long is that?
It's
approximately.
I mean, it depends, but it's not that long. It's 80,000 words. So
that's long. That's long.
it felt long to me, but
Yeah.
I know there are people who write like 120,000 words and stuff like that, and yeah. But to me, 80,000 was quite a challenge, and just to get it all together. But I mean, it's based on a huge novel, so there's that.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a
Awesome.
rewriting. Of course it is. I mean, but I do have some stories that are not retellings. But I think, I don't know. To me, like most writing is kind of rewriting other stories. So yeah.
Yeah. Like those quotes that you've probably heard. You know, they seem to be float around every now and then about how there's only so many stories.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're all just telling them from our own version, sort of thing. So
Yeah.
when you actually think about it, takes some of the pressure off. For me, I'm
It
like,
does.
oh well, no one expects you to break the mold, so I'll just write from my perspective. So yeah, absolutely. No, that's fantastic. Oh, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has just been amazing. It's been so nice to chat to you, and I love your stories about it all. I'm like, this is so cool. So for anyone who's watching again, because I want to ask a million more questions, but I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read this amazing book. So what I'm going to tell you is all to go read it. It's so great. And if you're anything like me, once you've read it, you will go out and go, this was the worst idea to go to the shops after this, because candy is going in my bag. That's it. Yeah. It's terrible. You make it so yummy. But yes, it was so nice to talk to you about this. Like I said, the comments aren't letting me chuck anything up at the moment, but that's okay.
No, that's
right.
fine.
So,
that's fine. I think we managed to go along anyway with all my tangents.
Oh, the tangents are fascinating. I really love hearing more about how people behind the author, you know, how the stories all come about, how the love of words, how writing and everything becomes part of your life. It's fascinating. So thanks everyone for joining us. Feel free to drop down questions or comments or anything if you are watching this later, and we'll see what we can do. But yes,
because
thanks
I'm on
everyone.
Facebook now. Thank you.
Not a problem. All right, thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.